The best part of your week is about to begin. This is the time where we talk shop, swap stories, and share lessons from our wild adventures in the creative industry. With each and every lovingly crafted episode, we strive to bottle that magic, warm, electric feeling you get after coffee with a new friend or attending a fantastic breakout session at a creative conference. You might start as strangers, but you'll leave as friends. Buckle up, settle in, and get ready for this episode of Making a Mark. Hello and welcome to another episode of Making a Mark, the show where we bring on creators and ask them one big question and unpack it together like buddies under around a cup of coffee. I am joined, as always, by everyone's favorite internet friend, Ashley Ulmer.
Hello. Happy Friday. How are you?
Happy Friday indeed. Ashley, and we were in the green room. I brought up your T-shirt about 4 times, and I need to know,
I
like,
didn't hear you. I
is
was
this
too
an
busy.
OG? You're
No.
busy scarfing down
I
that
wish
burrito?
it was original. No, I'm eating buffalo chicken. Let's be clear. I'm eating chicken. But
Okay.
no, this shirt, I wish it was an original. That'd be cool. No, I got it from Target last year, but I had the album, so it counts, right?
Yeah, if it for the podcast listeners, she's got the Green Day. Is that the Dookie album cover?
Yeah. My
Yeah.
kids think
that
it's
was. I've been in a intense pop punk phase here the past week or so. I don't know. Somebody sent me like a worship crossover with Yellow Card, and like as if the worship band was playing. I need to drop the video in the show notes, but it is way too spot on. And then it just got the earworms in, man. Like I've been listening to all the things from high school and college on intense levels of repeat. But
oh yeah, that's all I
I
listen
feel like
to.
I could see that. I could see that for you. As much as you and I could probably talk about pop punk and that era, this everybody's emo phase. That's not what we're here to talk about today, Ashley. Who do we have with us on the episode today?
We have none other than the amazing Brady. Did I say it? Shearer? Shearer?
What?
That's correct.
Thanks for being here, Brady.
Love it.
Glad to be here. Excited to chat.
Dude,
Awesome.
this is kind of a wild moment because I think one of the first times when I say met you, I was like introduced to you, was on the TV screen at my church. And this is like 4 or 5 plus years ago. Back in the day, I think you were, and maybe you still do, like church announcements. Like you'd like go batch pre-record church's announcement videos. And so you were on my screen every Sunday. And then I put 2 and 2 together one day when I found you on Instagram. And I was like, oh, this is the guy. I don't know. That was a wild one. But
yeah, those comments come in still sometimes. You'll be on Instagram and someone will be like, I see you at my church. And I'm like, oh no, it's like when 2 parts of your world cross over and you're like, this wasn't supposed to happen. Oh no.
Wait, so how did that happen? So like, did like churches would hire you to read their specific announcements for the week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the product still exists. It's called provideoannouncements.com. You can find it. And it was pretty trendy, mid 2010s. Churches would send in their scripts to us and we'd produce the video announcements, and then videography gear and that sort of thing became so much more accessible that churches began to be able to do them themselves. And so the product was not as popular as it is today.
Yeah.
Or pardon me, but yeah, good times.
That's interesting. That's such like I would never think to tap into that specific market. Like, but that makes so much sense because there's so many small churches that don't, or at least back then didn't have maybe not the technology or
I mean, the alternative was do it on stage, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's cool.
That was wild. And then my church, like, they used it heavily back in the day. And now they've, like you're saying, especially after the pandemic when everybody like, oh shoot, we got to figure out how to live stream and went through that whole process. Now my church has it almost like as a news broadcast before, like they've got people walking in behind and they're set up out in the atrium and rolling announcements that way as everybody's getting seated and stuff, which feels like a super appropriate time and kind of fun format to do that in too. Yeah. So before we jump into the topic today, we're gonna remember all the segments of our show today, Ashley. We're gonna we're gonna ask
do it.
you, Brady, how you made this mark, and we're gonna pull up a post from your Instagram. And I just want to kind of hear the backstory. You can either talk about like craft and like specifics about it, or there's just a fun little story around it. Let me pull up window. You know, if I was a real professional, I'd have all this stuff ready to go, but here we are. All right, Ashley. How
Okay,
far down are we?
I don't think it was too far. I just was okay. Stop. The little
right
dots. The reason I
The
picked that is
dots.
because I wanted to give it a talking point, because obviously you have to scroll and see what it is. But for you to explain what this is and what that product is, or that brand.
Yeah, so this was a product that we launched at the very beginning of this year called Social Sermons. Socialsermons.com is the URL. And frankly, it's a very similar model in terms of product to Pro Video Announcements. We call it a productized service. So the cost is pretty high, I would say. I think it's like $750 a month for Social Sermons. And we can only accommodate a limited number of churches. So we have about 100 churches in the program. That was how many spots that we had. So we launched it. All the spots got maxed out. The idea with this type of product is the cost is for custom work lower than what you would come to expect. So for a lot of churches, custom work, $750 a month for, this many videos, 3 new videos every single week that are custom. That's great. And the idea behind Social Sermons is very similar to sending us your script and we produce your video announcements, except this time you send us your sermon file that was recorded last week. And then we turn it into bite-sized 60 seconds or less videos for social media, Social Sermons.
That's cool.
I love it.
Again, I would never, I don't, I don't work at a church, and I actually never have, but I would never think that, but that's such a perfect untapped market. I mean, maybe not untapped. I'm sure there's other people that do it, but I'm just saying the product itself or the service itself, that's so genius, because every church needs that. So that's so cool that you guys do that. And it's probably, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I really, we've found a lot of great success, and this is surely useful to the creatives that are listening. So, okay, how do I get more clients? How do I, create more sustainable and consistent income each month? What's amazing about a productized service is that, like I said, it's the result for the client is something that's custom, but the process is very systematic on your side of things. And so at the end of the day, the church or the client that you're working with, they get something like, wow, this was made just for me. But what you've done is you've engineered a systematic process to predictably churn out that same quality of content. But because it's within this predefined framework, there's not as much back and forth. There aren't as many revision requests, if any, and you can do it at scale. And so we hired 16 actually new employees to accommodate this project. We had 100 churches sign up in the first week, 16 new employees. I'm not doing anything hands-on for it. So I engineer the product. I did the pilot project with a few churches when we were kind of building out the framework. But then once the real thing is going, we're plugging all of these new employees and team members into it. Yeah. And again, every month the billing goes through, $749 a month each month for the churches that are signing up, and they get the new Social Sermons every single week. And so it's from a product standpoint, it's this hybrid, right? It's custom, but it's also predefined. And it's at that intersection that not too many products exist. And in the church space specifically, that lower cost makes things more accessible. So that means I don't have to just sell to a church a $3,000 to $5,000 branding project or logo project or design project. It can be $750 a month, and I'm delivering a lot more. So it seems like more work, lower cost. But with that predefined framework, it's actually not as much work. And every month you're getting that predictable income, which for me, when I was first starting in 2012, I was making $1,200 a month as a media director at a church. And I'm trying to start out and do my own thing. And we had 4 churches sign up for video announcements at $300 a pop back then. And I was like, great, I just replaced my church income.
Yeah.
And that wasn't just I sold a big video to a big client and it's a 3-month project and then it's done. Exactly. So
that's cool. That's so good. Interesting.
And I feel like you're getting me excited, kind of speaking my language in terms of nailing down systems and a process. I mean, we talked about it last episode, actually, with like how being really thorough about your project management or about the way that you're doing all the boring steps to do the creative thing frees you up to either do it faster or better or more seamlessly.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, especially that lean more on the artist side of the designer spectrum, if you will, they think like as soon as you have a system, as soon as you have a recipe, you've just sucked the life out of it. It doesn't sound like a fun job anymore. You're sucking the soul out of it. But
Mm.
I've found that, if you have the right gaps in that system, it's like, hey, all right, this is where we play. This is where we like, interject our own life or personality or whatever. Like those are the moments when, and you've got all the ingredients to make a great thing. So I'd assume like as those videos come down the pipe for you guys, y'all get, a big old chunk of like probably an hour long live stream video, right, Brady? And then they're going to take it and you probably have a couple of rounds. Actually, can you like break down I don't know if that's proprietary or not, but do you mind like sharing like the recipe like that you guys go through? So some of those boring steps that allow things to get streamlined.
Sure. It's not proprietary. In fact, and this is another insight into our process on like the, business organization side of things, is that when we launch a product, we basically launch it with this accompanying workshop where we tell churches exactly what to do and what we're doing. And then say, if you want us to do it for you, you're welcome to pay us for it. But now we've given you exactly everything you need to do it yourself.
That's cool.
And there's something very disarming about that, I think, because you're not saying, hey, this is some secret process that only you can get if you pay us. It's like, no, we developed this process and we know it works, but it will come with time. Mm-hmm. And if you have, it's basically which resource do you want to spend on this? You have your time, you got your treasure, you got your talent. And if you want to spend your treasure on it, spend the cash. We can do it for you. If you want to spend your time and your talent on it, go for it. And the process is going to work either way. So if you're interested in that workshop, it's still up. It's churchsocialmediaplan.com, where you can see the workshop and reverse engineer how we did everything. But essentially starts with churches uploading their sermon file to us. And we're using a tool called Massive for this, which is an uploading software, which you can then integrate with other tools. So what'll happen is someone will basically, through Boomerang, which is a Gmail plugin, receive an automated email every single Sunday saying, hey, it's time to upload your sermon to us. The link in that email goes to a type form, and the type form links out to the Massive portal that is unique to a church. So when they sign up, I create their own Massive portal. It's password protected. They get the password. So they log in to the portal and they upload their sermon file. And we also, what's nice about Massive is you can download the desktop app. We're talking about uploading bigger files here, usually several gigabytes. And depending on what your internet connection is like, a desktop app, which will allow you to continue uploading, even if like the connection gets broken or whatever, is really useful. So we use a tool that can help churches in that way, because if they're always doing everything through browser, it can be difficult. We always do everything through browser. I'm wired Ethernet everything, so it doesn't bother me. But multiple options there. When that file gets uploaded, the Massive portal, and again, we're really into the weeds here. Hopefully this is interesting to some people. The Massive portal is connected to frame.io, and Frame, which was recently acquired by Adobe, is kind of a video reviewing platform. So let's say you're working with a client, you're doing a video project, you upload the final to Frame, and then you send that review link to them, and then they get to go, they can click on the screen, they can annotate, they can make time-stamped comments. Oh, we need to change this here, circle something. This is overexposed, let's fix this. In our context, every single church has their own project in Frame. So let's say you're Hope Church, you upload your sermon file to the Hope Church portal, it gets automatically sent into Frame, and then when a file gets uploaded to that Frame project for Hope Church, the people that are working specifically on that account receive an email notification. Oh, sermon file for this church has been uploaded. Great. So the first step in social sermons is the copywriter. And what they do is they watch through the entire sermon, and using this outsider perspective, which is really useful for then taking sermon content and bringing it to social, they're picking out what are the most useful segments of this sermon that we can bring to social. And there's an entire process for that. We can get into that, but it's more of a separate thing. They then make time-stamped comments using frame.io. So they'll say, okay, from 14 minutes and 10 seconds through 15 minutes and 45 seconds, this is the best spot. And we're
I
keeping
love
everything
this
under a
so
minute.
much.
So like here, it's like 1 to 2 minutes is what the editor wants. Here's where things get really fun. So because Frame.io was bought by Adobe, it integrates directly with Adobe Premiere Pro now. So when the editor, which
Nice.
is the second employee on a church's account, gets the file, they open it directly in Premiere, and the timestamp comment is right there. So you can cut and trim using the timestamp that's getting brought dynamically in
Come
to
on.
Adobe. So they chop it up, send it out to the church. We're using a tool called Vista Social to schedule content to YouTube Shorts, Facebook and Instagram Reels, and TikTok, and publish on churches' behalfs. And so we upload the files to Vista Social. That sends out emails for approval. Churches can, within Vista Social, approve the post or reject it, provide revision requests, make the changes. They get the approval again. They hit approve, and then repeat next week. So
That's cool.
Wild. So, I mean, I feel like I don't speak for the whole audience here, but definitely I love hearing kind of the behind the scenes, like how things connect up. Because for anyone who's built anything remotely close to what you just described, there can be like some showstopper roadblocks at any one of 15 points along that process. And engineering, like, okay, at what point do we need a human hand on this? And this thing won't talk to this thing. Does that mean our product is dead? That's fascinating. Do you have like a go-to? Is there somebody on your team? Is it you? Is it a resource that you go to for developing some of those systems? And I forget what the software people call it, like a stack of a tech stack, like that you go to.
I mean, so our main product at our company is called Nucleus, and the primary thing that we do is we develop software. And so that's a church website builder, CHMS, giving software, all that good stuff, all in one integrated software for church tech. So typically when we would launch something, we would build it ourselves with our team of engineers. But for social sermons, we wanted it to be this separate entity. It was kind of like, hey, we haven't launched a product in a long time. Can I still do this? Like, am I still relevant? Do I still have it, or am I washed?
Yeah.
And so
still have what it takes.
Social sermons was like, you know what? I'm going to build this entire thing using tools that are pre-existing. And we didn't have, aside from the landing page of socialsermons.com, which is one page that I had my designers and engineers like spin up in a week. Every single thing is run by a pre-existing third-party tool. And we only use tools that integrated with other ones. Now, there are always going to be things that don't work perfectly, right? And each church has an editor. Each church has a copywriter. And churches will upload a file, and they meant to upload, 68 minutes, and they uploaded 9 minutes and 39 seconds. And so then, our customer support team reaches out and says, hey, we need you to re-upload this file. The biggest issues come...
Try again.
Precisely. The biggest issues come from scheduling content to social platforms, because these APIs from Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube
change.
And they're open, but a church, there'll just be these weird publishing errors. Now, churches really value being able to just upload their sermon file and know they have to do nothing. I mean, I think to make things cleaner, we would just deliver the finals and they would post on their behalf, or they would post by themselves.
Value add for them.
Exactly. So we kind of deal with the issues of unknown error, YouTube ID 175. Okay, well, I don't even know what that might be. But
I hate that.
So there are real people that are kind of overseeing all of these things. But for the most part, I mean, we've got 100 plus churches in the service, and we're pumping out 500 videos every single week. And everyone's getting their social sermons on time. Things are being published as they should, and little things are happening here and there. But it was really a testament, I think, to the great team that we brought on. We hired 60 people from scratch, went through an entire hiring process, but also the system that was reliable enough to work, because, we went from 0 videos in week 1 to 500 the next week after 100 churches signed up in the first week. And, it's been going pretty smooth. I'm pleased.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And I know in the green room you said, hey guys, let's don't plug our products. I don't want this thing to feel too salesy. So audience, rest assured, Brady did not pay to be on the illustrious podcast empire that is Making a Mark. This is not a sponsored content. It just truly is one of the things that jumps out to me about not only like the business you've built and like the services that you offer, but it's just like your ability to kind of bridge the gap between where most people are and their needs versus like what is a better way to solve that.
Yeah.
But before we go too much further into that, Autumn's got a great question for us down in the comments. Enjoy listening to Pro Church Tools podcast. What's been one of your products or services that you have personally gotten the most excited about?
I just would like to take the moment here. I understand that this is a typo, but we're not here to get into the abortion debate. It's the Pro Church Tools podcast, not the Pro Choice. Just like, look, I am Canadian. I understand we are more progressive, typically this side of the continent. I'm not here to really wade into that, but Autumn, obviously we understand. Just poking fun here that was a typo. So, I mean, yeah, one of the products that I'm most excited about. I mean, each one has its own like special place in my heart. I have 2 children, kind of the same thing. As the director, president, CEO, like whatever title I decide to put on the tax form on the day that they send it, as like the overseer of the company, it's always fun approaching a new challenge. And we only dive into projects that are really exciting for us. And that's definitely one of the benefits and privileges that we've had. And we work really hard to maintain. We don't want to do things just to like, oh, we got to run payroll this month. And so we have to do this.
We got to take this job on just because it makes money. Yeah,
precisely. So that's really important to us. I mean, big picture, building a software platform from scratch that is used by thousands and thousands of churches, which then, ancillary of that is used by tens of thousands of parishioners in churches is truly like something you can't really wrap your mind around it. And that's really exciting. Then on like the complete system side of things, like building a social sermons and then pulling that off with all of like the systems and kind of like doing it from scratch. And hey, it's been 10 years since we've run a company. Like, can we get back to how we first started and repeat that level of success? And then the gratification that comes from like all the hard work paying off with like a big launch event that meets and succeeds your expectations, like that's really special as well. And each one has its own set of like challenges too. Like working with clients is difficult, as we all know. Churches being like, you go through a perfect thing. They're like, I didn't like this. Like start over. And you're like, well, we have parts of the form that allow you to kind of let us know if you'd like something different ahead of time, so we don't have to redo it. Okay, but that's how it goes. But then software. There's tens of thousands of people using the software every week. Okay, so bugs are being encountered. Oh, I can't reset my password. I'm trying to give to my church. Linda, what's the problem? Well, I entered the wrong email address. How do I reset my password? Well, I can't reset your password to an email that you don't actually own. It doesn't exist.
Right.
I have to give to my church. Why does your software suck? You don't love the church. Linda, come on, man. Help me out here. We're in this together.
I have a question. I know it's called Pro Church Tools, but do you guys offer your services to like small businesses or anything like that, or only strictly ministry-based organizations?
So that's a great question. And the answer is no. I went to school to be a youth pastor. So I have my degree in theology and youth ministry. And it was in school that I started getting into the media and tech side of things, got brought on at a church as a media director. And that's where my love of church and like tech kind of intersected. Yeah. I realized a couple of years into school, like I just don't have the relational bandwidth to be a full-time student pastor. I just am too much of an introvert. Like I love being with people, but again, my bandwidth for that, it is always shrinking. And then I have to recharge. Yeah. So to be with people all that time, like I wouldn't be able to serve them well.
Yeah.
But I loved working with churches and I only wanted to work with churches. I did a video. It was like the biggest video that I ever sold in college. And it was for a nonprofit in the city. And they were working with sex trafficking victims. So it was like this great cause. And it was video for a nonprofit. And I was so miserable on this job. Like it just wasn't, it just didn't like, it wasn't me running in my lane. And so anytime I've tried to venture out, and I haven't done this in a long time now, because I learned my lesson, but early stages, oh, maybe I'll try this for this company or for this business or for this nonprofit. And I was just always miserable. And so I've just always stuck with churches, love working with churches, love the church, love Linda, it's all good.
Shout out to Linda.
Linda is, not the wind beneath your wings. She's like the lead on your wings. But yeah, and I think that you touched on something that's an interesting, like grass is always greener deal. Like I hear people, especially, not to stereotype, but like young like yuppie dudes are like, I just need like passive income. I've read 4 Hour Work Week. Like, let me bro down on my future or whatever. Like that whole
That's what my
thing.
mom
They're
said when
like,
I told her I wanted to try all this. And I think,
it's
and I
just
don't even
like,
blame her. You can't make money on the internet, Braid. You have to get a job, finish your degree. Mom, no, it's all right. They're going to buy my stuff online. It's 2011.
it's gonna be scalable. Yeah. So like people look at that and they think like, oh, like, you know, if I have a software I can just sell 1,000 times, then life will be easy. I can just check out. But like I don't know. I feel like anytime something is truly hands off, unless it's like an investment or whatever, any type of business model that you're assuming is just hands off and cruise control, like either somebody's going to come in and take that from you because like if it's free money, you know, like why would they pay you?
Yeah.
Or it requires hand holding, or like you've already kind of touched on, like there is a launch phase and a planning, and like how do we make all the bones of it work? We go through trial, we show the goods to the customer, and like say, hey, here's the recipe. Do you want to cook it yourself? Like there's all this work before you launch it, and then you have to maintain it and service the machine. Like it's all work. It just depends on like what kind of work that you want to be doing. But I think it's great that you kind of found your sweet spot, like you said, um, yeah, like we can, you know, one of the things that I want to unpack too is like how do you sift through ideas and you know like determine stuff. But before we jump into that, we're gonna take a quick break, and I want to actually oh shoot. All right, caught up with my notes here. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I see a lot of churches out there kind of wrestling between um like either they either fall into one of two ditches. Like, hey, we have to do everything the first time. Like we everything is original. All of our processes, all of our, you know, creative things that we do, we you know, we got to be completely original, like no other church has ever done it like this before. Or they take all of their cues from successful church that they like down the road or across the country or
Yeah.
wherever, and they say we want to be fill in the blank junior church. And I've seen
Mm,
you kind of do talks on both sides of that. Like when is it time to trailblaze
Mm.
versus when is it time to follow a proven method?
yeah.
Um, and like how do you kind of decipher or advise on that?
Sure. Well, I think copying other churches, you know, for me, copying other creators can absolutely be appropriate. What I talk about is balancing impersonation and fusion. Ideally, when you copy another creator, what you're doing is you're creating fusion, which is bringing some of their creative concepts and those intersecting with your creative DNA and your creative values, and then that creating something new. When we think about fusion in cuisine, you take something from like one corner of the globe and how they prepare food, and you connect it with some other corner of the globe, and you create this amazing like
Come on.
remix of something. And I
Yeah.
remember when I first got started in creative ministry, again, 2010, my pastor sent me this little docu-series on Vimeo, and it was called Everything is a Remix. And
Mm,
it was basically 3 parts explaining how like there is nothing new, and everything that you love is some amalgamation of other things that you either already love or have never heard of but previous generations loved.
yeah.
And so when I first got started, and this changes the longer you've been doing something, because there is a element of like finding your voice when you're talking like me, or you're writing, or you're on a podcast. There's an element of like finding your style in videography, in graphic design, in web design, in branding, whatever it might be. But at the beginning, you don't have that, right? So it's like, how do you find your voice? Well, I found my voice by just copying people that I thought were really good and I admired. So at the beginning, when I would write exactly the way they wrote. And when I would
Mm,
talk, I'd talk exactly the way they would talk. And then after a while, like I would find somebody else and I would be like, I actually like how they talk too. And then I'd bring in some of their concepts. And the
yeah.
longer that I did it, the more I began to take things from many sources and just took what made sense for me. And then that became me. But at the
Yeah,
beginning,
your voice, yeah.
like, I remember early days, people would be like, man, you sure talk like Gary Vaynerchuk. Because, yeah, he's like the only person I'm listening to. And like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to talk. And at least in the church world, there weren't too many other people to even look up to in this specific space. And I didn't want to talk like a preacher because that's not what I do.
Yeah.
And so I'm bringing other folks from different industries. And this is another thing about finding your voice in this sense, or finding your design style, whatever it might be. I love looking to other industries and what works, best practices beyond the church world,
Yes.
and bringing it here. So like in YouTube, like what are the fitness YouTubers doing? Or what are like the fragrance YouTubers doing? Or what are the sports YouTubers doing? And then
Yeah.
like seeing what makes sense for their industry. Because a lot of the time, the concepts for social that are working in other industries, those are universal. Yes, I'm not talking about converging chest press in my YouTube videos, but the way they're structuring their videos and how they're doing their interviews and how quickly they're getting into the content and what they're doing with promotion and calls to action, all of that stuff is universal. And why I like bringing it into our industry is because like what happens is your industry and your culture can become very insular. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't look beyond the industry that they're in because perhaps they feel, it's not appropriate to look at what someone else is doing and bring it into my world. What does a fragrance YouTuber know about the church creative space? Well, nothing, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn from other industries. And that's been a huge
100%.
asset for me because you bring something in and people are like, wow, this is new and fresh. To us it is, but it's actually just a copy from somebody else. And so at the beginning, if you are a carbon copy of somebody else, that's okay. Like we all literally have to start from scratch, and you write your first sentence and you publish your first podcast and you deliver your first, vectors or whatever for the design project and the first client you have. And it's okay if it's that carbon copy at the very beginning and you just keep developing and keep developing. Fusion. What you want to avoid is impersonation. And impersonation happens when you copy someone else's style, their technique, their strategies, and it's a carbon copy, but you don't understand your own, at least creative values. And in the church space, this is something that we see a lot. So, hey, big church X, affluent church X, very highly visible church X is doing live streaming, has a church app, uses this platform, does this sort of thing. Let's do that. And that could work. But you first need to interrogate that idea against your own mission as a church and your own values and your own identity and DNA. Absent having an established identity or DNA, you bring in someone else's creative ideas, someone else's trailblazing, and that's when it becomes impersonation. When it gets intersected with your existing DNA and identity, that's when you get fusion, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
That's good. Fusion is a really positive way to talk about that, because I feel like, other variations of that conversation are really just like headbutting or, I hear kind of both sides of it. Actually, I don't know about you, but like looking through, Instagram accounts and like the first person that did the, you pour the milk in the coffee cup and there's a message written on one side of it, they turn it around, whatever.
Right.
And like I think that's a great little microcosm of exactly what we're talking about, where, like it was clever the first time you saw it, and then I saw it 17 other times that week.
Right.
And does that make it like a bad thing? Like Josh hates it. Josh would never do the coffee thing personally, but I also like, I think that sometimes I'll hamstring my own possible growth or exposure because I'm so unwilling to copy anything.
Sure.
But like Brady's saying, like I'm still drawing career and visual inspiration from other sources, and that's that fusion you're talking about. It's like, okay, I think another healthy way to approach that would be, rather than straight ripping the coffee idea, go like, oh crap, I wonder what is happening in coffee industry, or how do we just like fish from other ponds? Because I think that's one of my big critiques of Christian music as well, is it just feels soulless and a little tired because we're all listening to and catering to the same voice sound audience, and I hate seeing the creative space for church and Christianity kind of heading the same direction in a lot of ways. And I think that it's because we are so scared to drink from other wells, and we think that because church X did it and they're successful, that means it will be successful for us in our market. And there's just so many other factors that go into it. And so having that, I think Brady said it well, when like just having a real sense of like who you are will let you know when things are or are not a fit. But you got to kind of
Yeah,
look within, if you will, first.
for sure. Brady, I have a question, kind of a hot take question. So I'm wondering, so your name is Pro Church Tools, and obviously a lot of our listeners are familiar with Pro Church Media. That you guys have no relation at all, correct? So you're not connected to them in any way?
That's correct. Yeah. So first of all, Pro Church Tools, probably the worst name in the history of names.
Not
The
if you're
name-
shopping domains, though, I bet.
The name got chosen when the best man at my wedding was encouraging me to start this blog, which is how Pro Church Tools began, prochurchtools.com. And he
Yeah.
just sent me over a ton of names. He's like, because he was a software engineer, designer, and he had his own company. So he was 10 years older than me. He had been doing this stuff for a while. He's like, here, you could do Pro Church Tools. You could do this, all these other. And I was like, Pro Church Tools, that one sounds like the best one. Go with that. You know, it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
It means nothing. It's fine. Great.
Right.
And so it comes from there. So a couple years later, I stumbled across this company called Pro Church, no tools. And I was like, oh, okay. And I come to know the owner of that company, and it's an American company. And the reason I came across it was because I was trying to trademark Pro Church Tools, which was fine until they're like, well, we can't trademark it in America. Why? Well, because Pro Church exists, and they were a printing service at the time, I believe, for churches.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
And then I come across Pro Church Media. There's a Pro Church Lighting, Pro Church Lights. There's like 100.
There's a lot.
And you know, look, to everyone listening, I do not know why you would continue to name something that already has a name. I do not get it. Like, I made an innocent mistake as a 21-year-old. Okay.
Yeah, but after you see the herd heading that direction, you're like, all right. I can't tell you how many like elevation youths I have seen out in the world.
Yeah,
Just like, yeah, how many of those were around before elevation blew up? I don't know,
but you know what? Like, at least church is local in-person ministry, and so like the elevation youth in Pittsburgh or whatever, it's like, okay, cool. Like, we're in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. Like, no one's gonna mistake that church online when they're trying to find elevation youth in the Carolinas.
right? Yeah.
All of our pro church companies are online companies.
Yeah.
So it
They're all
just
the
seems
same.
like bad process, And I'm friendly with the Pro Church Media folks, and I don't know the Pro Church Lighting folks. I think it's Pro Church Lighting, Pro Church Lights. Anyway, it hasn't actually caused any problems. Pro Church, the printing service, we got emails from their company, their vendors, their customers, a good amount back in the day. Hey, cancel my service, and we'd find them. We don't have you in our database, and quickly we realized, okay, if this happens, we need to send them to the printing company, and not us. I don't know. I don't believe that happens very much anymore. But when we named Nucleus, we went through a more rigorous process than just whatever. Let's get that domain.
Yeah,
Right.
where is some undriven snow?
That's interesting.
Great.
But with all these different pro church companies, your guys' service, like, you guys don't cross over as far as doing the same service. Like, everybody's a little bit different as far as what they even offer, right? Like,
well, yeah, and Pro Church Tools, our company, is really just the umbrella name for the company.
Yeah.
And that was an intentional departure. Like, a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I stopped putting Pro Church Tools as like the name on the social accounts, and it went to Pro Church Tools with Brady Shearer, which then eventually just became Brady Shearer, because people searching for Pro Church Tools it's not a thing. There's nothing you can buy from Pro Church Tools, and I'm not certain that was like, well, I am certain it was the right move. There are some downsides to it that we could probably do a better job at mitigating. The prochurchtools.com website could use an update. It hasn't been updated in about 3 years. It's pretty, but it doesn't exactly have all the right information that you need. But at the end of the day, people are going to Nucleus to find what they need for that product.
Gotcha.
They're going to social sermons to find that. And if they want to engage with our content, well, that's what's happening on social, on the podcast, and on YouTube, and it's all under my name for the most part. So that was how we mitigated that challenge.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's an interesting one, too, about like building a brand around a personality, because like you're kind of the face and the go-between. Like, obviously, like Nucleus, people are thinking about their website needs and how that relates to whatever they've got going on. But if they're saying, I need advice, they're hitting up Brady Shearer. And then what happens if you're like, I'm tired of this, or I need to get out, and that might be questions for tomorrow. And it's kind of an interesting one for our guest next week too, Ashley, because Sunday Cool Tees has done a similar thing around Josh, who has branded himself as the caricature Cool Carl,
Yeah.
where like he is the massive, like biggest driver of sales and leads and attention to their product.
Yeah.
And like, what if he got tired of doing it? Like, and how does the brand change when it's tied to
Oh, true.
a
Yeah.
spokesperson like that? Like, that's an interesting
Mhm.
one. Obviously, things are pretty friendly. Brady, like you own all these companies, I would assume, and so like your interests are tied in. Like, I enjoy working with my friends, I enjoy the work, I want to talk about these things, but
Yeah.
it just feels like they're similar to the grass is always greener. There's always some like sticky thing around how you name and present things in the world, but
Mhm.
Well, and that's why, to speak to that, that's why we kind of got into software as a hedge against like me being too present. Because when we were
Yeah.
just doing client work through those productized services, when we were selling courses and ebooks, it was entirely dependent on me to kind of sell and then resell when, you know,
Yeah.
another launch was coming around.
Yeah.
What's amazing about software is that your church still needs a website, even if you are no longer following me on Instagram. And there are these natural life cycles to following creators that have nothing to do with like, I disagree with this person now. What happens, at least in my experience, is like you follow someone for a few years and we all have like the same things to say, essentially. And after a while, it's like, yeah, like my financial advice, like I don't need to listen to Dave Ramsey anymore. I know the 7 baby steps.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I'm disagreeing with them anymore per se, but it means maybe I'll listen to someone else's financial advice for a while because they'll have a different take on it. And so that does represent a vulnerability if your only way of earning sales is through like the spokesperson.
Right.
So we kind of get into software because, hey, irrespective of you following Brady, you need a website. You need to find a way to process
That's
giving
smart.
online. You need a CHMS. It is smart. It costs millions and millions of dollars, though. So I just want to make sure I put that caveat in. Building software is wildly expensive. It takes a very long time to build a customer base. And you never ever stop spending money on it because there's no done. There's no, we delivered the software product. No such thing. It is an unfinished product at all times, which for certain personality types will be challenging. So I say all that to say, yes, software has this amazing byproduct and all that, but it certainly has its challenges, which is the expensive side. So that's kind of how we've hedged against that, which has worked well. And people are going to more and more begin using Nucleus that have nothing to do with me. But
Yeah. That's cool.
And I've worked at it was probably not like a fancy software company, but there's like 30 or 40 developers at it. And I was in the creative arm, but just my time there, like learning how intense software can be and like how many steps there are, especially when you're like starting from scratch. 'Cause it's different from, web where you're, like maybe working from an open source platform or some other type of like Squarespace, whatever. But yeah, software can be a booger. But one of the things that you touched on a long time ago in one of your videos was like working with your friends. Like from what I understand, like a lot of your hiring process originally was formed around like hiring buddies, hanging out with buddies. You talked about like all the sitcoms you used to watch. All the friends were with each other all the time. And like in this day and age, the only way to do that is to work together because you spend more time with your team than you do with your family a lot of times, much less your friends. So what has that been like? And I promise, I doubt that any of your team will actually listen to this. So you can really speak freely and talk about how tough it can be if you want to.
I mean, it has been way more good than tough. A dramatic net positive in every respect. So to provide some context, the first 6 or 7 employees that we hired were friends from youth group. So we went to youth group and life's great, and then we go off to Bible college, and some of us go to the same Bible college, some of us don't, and we would come back in the summer and it's still great. And then I was like, what's going to happen is we are going to get involved in our jobs, and our jobs are going to make us move places. And then we're going to have kids, and that's great too. And what happens is like, we can see this over data as well. You just start spending less and less time with your friends. And I don't know if this is true for either of you, but like when I talk with my friends, I'd be like, what was it like with your parents? Did they have friends? And most of us were like, I don't really remember my parents having friends. Oh, when I was really young, I remember we would go somewhere and we'd see friends. But the older we got, the less people we saw. And this is why church is such an amazing thing in the time that we live in right now. And social, this is an entirely separate conversation that we've been exploring a bit on our YouTube channel this week and next week, which will be probably last week or previous weeks when this goes live. Social has its downsides. And one of them is that it can make us very insular and disconnect us from in person. And what's amazing about church is that it provides that ability for us all to be together in person. And that was where, for the first time ever, I felt accepted as a kid. Like school, I was sporty, but I was also like intellectual. So I never really fit in either of those categories cleanly. And I was always kind of like just a bit of an outsider. And then I get to youth group and suddenly I feel accepted. And that was where I first in my life found accepted. And now I have kids. I have an 8-year-old and an 8-month-old, 2 daughters. And like, she's just starting to like find friends in church. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is what is amazing about this, because it's this third place that doesn't really exist in society right now. But anyways, I kind of saw that this was going to happen. And again, even if we all went to the same church,
real quick, Brady, how old are you right now when you're like looking down the field and you're thinking like, oh shoot, when I'm 50, I'm not going to hang out with my friends anymore. Let me build a career around hanging out with my friends. Like, what age were you thinking about this?
Yeah, I was 20, 21 was when we first hired Mitch, our first employee, one of the groomsmen at my wedding. So he was our first hire. Yeah. And it's been really great. Like, leading a team at all points, there's conflict resolution and there's like tension and there's like working through difficult things. But I think what we've always had for us as this big buffer is like margin in our company, meaning there's always been financial margin and there's always been time margin. So what we haven't had to do is like make a hard decision on who we keep to keep the company afloat, or pushing the team super hard to work beyond what would be, ideal for the sake of getting a project done, which then grates on relationships. Yeah. And so, we talk about the concept of calculated risks in leadership, knowing that like you can't stay conservative all the time, but you also don't want to be reckless. And when I consider a calculated risk in the context of our organization, I'm always thinking about, we need to maintain this amount of margin so that these things that we find extremely important for us, we're never infringing upon them, because that is the most important thing that we need to protect. And we have one of the values in our own company, which is called clearing the runway. And the idea of clearing the runway is that, there are certain places, certain airports in the world where the runway is really short and you have to take off or land in a really, really short period of time. And there are some like risks that come along with that. And clearing the runway is basically saying that, hey, as long as we are going to keep going along this runway and there's nothing that's going to get in the way of it. We clear all of the obstacles. And in that value, in the description, it talks about like, look, what we're trying to do is not like it's countercultural, not in the sense like we're changing the culture, but it's like, it's not the way that the typical forces of life over time are going to push you away from this thing. And we're even noticing it now that at the beginning of the pandemic, none of us have kids except for me. I have 1 kid, 7 other employees, 0 kids. Well, we took our first international retreat since the pandemic last month. We went to the Dominican and there was 5 kids. Next year, there's going to be 8 kids. And they're all under 2, except for my 8-year-old. So, man, that airplane, I apologize to everyone on that airplane. If you're listening, it was not our, we were not trying to do that to you, but it's kind of besides the point. But what's happened is with these kids is that we're starting to realize our free time is going down. And so even the work in person is like, oh, we're still not doing as much extracurricular as we used to. So we've put into place this year these things that we call memory makers. And there's like 4 to 6 that we're planning for the year. The first one was the in-person retreat, which was obviously the biggest one. We fly down to the Dominican. Everyone's there. We get this private villa. It's a great time. But we're having our second one March 12th, which is Oscars night. And we have an annual Oscars party every year. We dress up, formal wear. We watch the Oscars. Everyone votes on like who they think's going to win. And then we have this Oscar trophy this year for the first time. You've had informal winners in the past, but someone will be handed an Academy Award replica and then we'll inscribe your name on it and we'll award that trophy every year. We make cocktails that are puns on the names of the Best Picture nominations that year. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
What's great about those sort of things is that it's like 3 hours that one night. Mm-hmm. But it's such a special thing that's different from everything else you do. When do you dress up formal? When do you like, award something? So it's so distinct that proportionate to the time you spend on it, you remember it and it sticks in your memory for a long time. And that's kind of like our way of hacking.
That's brilliant.
We all have kids under 2. Like, it's so busy. It's so busy right now. And our work life is pretty well balanced, but with kids and family and extracurricular and daycare and spouses work and all this. So we're now doing more of these memory makers because we don't have as much time to just randomly be like, hey man, come over, we're watching the game tonight. Or, hey, let's just go grab a drink tonight. Like, those things aren't happening anymore.
The stuff that feels easy and natural and like you can slide it in, like it just, But
I'll just say one more thing about this.
Yeah.
Like, this matters to me so much. And I refuse to become a statistic on those graphs that show the older that you get, the less time you spend with friends. And the company is built in such a way to afford this. And then I'm like, we finished it. We did it. Except then all these kids were born. And I thought that this was like perfect. And now it's even harder. So I was like, I'm going to come up with
We had the machine dialed
it's memory
in.
makers. It's alliteration. And if you don't show up to Oscars night, if you don't get childcare for 3 hours, like, and that has afforded us getting back to that, even with this time, because you got to recognize it's seasonal, right? Like, these kids, I have an 8-year-old, and I have gone through the extremely busy phase to now, like, she wants to hang out with her friends.
Yeah,
she wants to, like, do that more than she wants to hang out with me. There comes a time where suddenly life gets back to, quote unquote normal. And that crazy young kids period, it ends pretty quickly, even though in the moment it seems forever.
Yeah.
And then if you haven't seen your friends in 6 years, like, it's a lot more difficult to just kind of like start it back up again.
Right.
And so the test for me as the leader,
how are you?
is to keep it going now. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't fall into that phase.
What a cool like culture to have though too. Like, what a unique like situation you guys have that you all are in that same season together. Like, most like companies or organizations, like, at least, I mean, like in my experience, my husband and I owned a business back in the day. Like, we had all of our employees were quite a bit younger than us. So like, we would try to relate to them on a certain level. Yeah. So it's like, but we had young kids at the time, and all of them are, early 20s and totally different stages of life. So how cool is it that you guys can experience that life together and work together? And, I feel like that's building even the stronger foundation as you grow throughout the years, as your kids grow up, as you guys grow up and grow together. That's so cool.
It's all about that longevity. Like,
that's good.
It's not, and this is true about anything. The longer you stick with the same thing is when it becomes more powerful, right? Like, oh, I had one great workout today. That doesn't mean anything. I had a bunch of great workouts this year. Great. I had a bunch of great workouts for 10 years. Oh, wow. How'd you do that? Like, how'd you make something so special? A lot of small, good decisions for a very, very long time. Yeah. And in relationships, they can be so just transient, right? And not because you don't want to stay in people's lives, but because the forces of life just force you to do otherwise. And so whatever we can do to fight and protect for this, so that when I'm 50, Mitch and I, who went to youth group together, who was my roommate in college, who like was a groomsman at the wedding, who was our first employee, like, we're still there, and our kids are hanging out, and we're still together, and so is everyone else. Like, that's the dream and vision. Now, if people want to go out and do their own thing, we celebrate them as well. We have one of our employees, they went and started their own company. We celebrated that.
To me.
Now they're shooting for Netflix. So amazing for them that worked out. And they're coming to the Oscars party next week because we're all still friends. But their trajectory of life took them elsewhere. And so it's also not about like keeping people here with like, the golden handcuffs and being like, you're here forever. But if they want to, they're welcome to stay.
That's awesome.
I love that. And I also think I want to applaud the intentionality, or like, not the intentionality, that kind of goes without saying, but the direction of the intentionality, because we hear about, like, I've toured like the Google offices, and they showed us like, yeah, here's like the nap pods, and here's your free, kombucha, and like all this, like all the possible bells and whistles, and like work life, and read things on Pixar and how they would like have their teams intermingle, and like, they would have like line dancing lessons at Pixar. And it's a lot of things that sound like blown up versions of what you're talking about. But the heart behind those things are, we want to broaden somebody's mind and get them to have the best ideas and work as hard as possible and not have a reason to leave work and stay on campus as long as possible and make the next best thing ever, or we're going to kill you. Right? Like, that's the seed of that is productivity. your seed and like the core of what you're talking about is I want to have longevity in these relationships. And that is what all the other trappings are for. And that's just super healthy. And like,
Yeah.
man, that's so stinking cool. Like, I love that.
Well, it's healthy relationally, but it isn't always healthy financially or from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And I'll just read you aloud one of the values that we have. It's called vibes, all caps. And this is the description. It says, productivity is not the highest goal. The bottom line is not the ultimate motivator. For what will it profit us to gain the whole world yet forfeit our souls? Practically, this could mean choosing a hybrid work week over peak efficiency, or investing in memorable shared experiences instead of stashing a bit more away. Structurally, and this is the important part, we won't sacrifice our collective well-being on the altar of private enterprise. And that's where the margin comes into play, because you have to protect that idea. That idea is extremely vulnerable, and it cannot protect itself in a capitalistic world, because the capitalistic forces will say, like, you need to make more money, you need to grow and expand. And this is one of the reasons why we've never taken private equity or capital for our software, because the second you bring that in, structurally,
you've got a new
change.
boss.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so that means building slower. It means building more thoughtful. It means doing things sometimes a bit differently. But that's why, like, we've been able to thread the needle so far, but it's always a really tricky balance, which is why we acknowledge that in the other value, which is like, hey, what we're trying to do here is ambitious. The world's systems are not made to cater to this ideal. And so keep the margin, protect it, and then make sure that you're giving people the income and the time and the job responsibilities that they need to live their best life also, because it's not just about, like, Brady getting his and having his friends all around and they're like, making below what they should. So
are you on the Brady friend list? Your pay is 20% higher than all other employees. That's
well,
me and my friends, we're going to make it.
To speak to that, this has been another thing that we've had to navigate. Everyone makes the same amount of money at our company.
Oh,
and
wild.
Because they all started making like 30 grand back in 2015, which was amazing because they were working part-time at like Adidas or Best Buy. And so we had salary. It was amazing. By next year, everyone who's working will be in the top 10% of earners in Canada based on their salary. And they got a raise this year. They're just on the cusp. But what we've always had is this kind of all for one, where they're like, if we start introducing a hierarchy where Mitch makes this and Alex makes this and Roxanne makes this, it has the potential to disrupt. And again, it's this very vulnerable idea we're trying to protect. If suddenly there's a hierarchy, that can ruin it all. Now, the trade-off is like everyone makes the same. So that introduces the possibility of tension, where if one person feels they're working harder than someone else, if some person feels like they're doing more, accomplishing more, providing more value than someone else. And that's where we have these open conversations where we're like, hey, this is the ideal we're trying to protect. And here are the trade-offs and the tensions that will come from it. So we have another value, say the quiet part out loud, which is like, anytime you feel any bitterness or resentment, just the seed of it, you have to confront it. Because we've chosen here collectively as like, a family and friend group is that we're going to have times where that happens as a necessity based on us all making the same thing. It's okay. So if that's the truth, then we have to confront the bitterness as soon as it happens, or otherwise we're actively going to work against, and we're going to become the enemies to this ideal that is very vulnerable.
Phew. Dang.
Yeah, that's
wild.
so good.
And there's also, like, I've been a part of smaller agencies where either we knew each other before we got into it, or we became like very close through the process, where it did feel like it was run like a family or group of friends. But then there was that and kind of like that experience got a little soured for me, to the point where I said, oh shoot, like I never want partners again. Because there's that risk, like you don't mix money and friends kind of thing. Not like I'm trying to go, screw anybody over, but I just don't want that added pressure to a friend relationship. But you've said, hey, that is an acceptable risk, and it is worth it for me to get the chance to work with these people, and it's worth the sweat and uncomfortability and maybe sacrifice, because if this were in another context, you would probably be making a pile more than all of your friends, and you said, I will pay that price so that I can have the friends work with me.
And to be clear, so I don't sound all altruistic, I make more than them. They all make the same. I don't make the same
Gotcha.
because I own the company, and by ownership of the company, fundamentally cannot make the same.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't even get paid in salary exclusively, as an example. But all the employees do, and so just want to be clear. People don't think that I am more altruistic than it's true.
Brady's over here making $1 a year and then taking home $4 million in
Because I love the
shareholder
grind,
distributions.
Josh.
Yeah.
I live for the grind.
He works at Lowe's on nights and weekends. People don't see that part of the pro church journey.
I asked the bank for a higher interest rate because I don't run from the grind like that.
As for a higher, that's gold, man.
Oh, man.
We thought we were going to talk about the future, and I guess we did. We talked about the future in a little different way, a little bit less predicting
Friends
the
growing
trends,
together. Yeah.
but more about like how do you build momentum around a direction. Yeah, and I would love to. There's two things I want to ask you before we jump off, and you tell me which one you want to answer. One is you talked about some really impactful kind of brand DNA, mission, value type things. I have worked behind doing brand projects and stuff. I've worked behind a ton of churches that have the same set of cultural values. They are a bunch of similar words that mean nothing in practical application. I've seen the same thing for a ton of businesses and entrepreneurs and people launching things, and they say we want to be excellent, yada yada yada. And so that's question number one: is how do you develop that type of deal? Like, how do you develop a DNA with teeth? Or would you rather talk about how to sift out winning and losing ideas? Because from the outside looking in, you guys have only produced bangers. Like, all of the products make a ton of sense. Everybody, the first time you hear it, actually, it happened to you on the show here. You said, oh, wow, that's a great product. Super timely, makes a ton of sense.
Right.
And I would assume that there is you're not just like a virtuoso over here, like every idea you wake up in a cold fever and they're all perfect. Like, there's a workshopping of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, which one of those are more interesting to you to unpack?
Well, I have been talking more about the values lately. One of the YouTube videos that I'm most proud of that we made this year is called My Most Embarrassing Leadership Mistake. And you can find that on the Pro Church Tools YouTube channel. Search my name, search Pro Church Tools, as we've discussed. Either will get you where you need to go. And the big thesis of that video was that, hey, I started this company at 21, same year I get married. And I was good at tech. And I was starting to prove to myself that I was pretty good at running a business. But managing people, like, just clueless. Remember, I did not have the relational bandwidth to be a pastor. So this stuff doesn't come naturally to me.
Right.
And then we're talking about mixing friends and business and the challenges that come with that. I would never say that those challenges don't exist, even though things have worked out so well for us to this point. And so the crux of that video was like, hey, what I had to do was I had to basically codify values that I would lean on to evaluate my own behavior, inform decision-making, and help me basically not react to challenges as they came up, but respond. Because I had this challenge where like running a business is full of stress. And I'm like 23 and I have like a 2-year-old at home, and I'd come to work and like, oh, something else came up, and like I'm just like emotionally volatile. And that wasn't good at home. And it also wasn't good at work. It's like, okay, Brady's like, oh, is this a good Brady day or a bad Brady day? You know, because I'm like figuring this all out on the fly. And so I codify these values as basically ways of like, hey, this is the person and the leader that I aspire to be. And so I have this personal set of values. I have shared them all in their entirety in that YouTube video. They each have a description and a scriptural anchor. Those are my personal values and family values. Then we also have values specifically for Pro Church Tools, and we have values specifically for Nucleus. So those personal values are going to be mine and my own and for my family. The Pro Church Tools values are for our team there, and then the Nucleus values are for that specific software platform, because software and the church space has a lot of things where when you're building something that's so big, you need values to decide, okay, how are we going to say yes or no to this specific feature or specific direction of the platform?
For sure.
So, yeah, I mean, it's very easy for these to just be fancy stanzas that live on a Google Doc but don't actually mean anything. I remember
like pop quiz every time they come up, like, oh, did I remember all the words? But they don't, clearly not impacting day-to-day decisions.
Right.
Precisely. And I think for me, they became real and kind of proved their worth in the crucible of difficult times. And the analogy I'll use for this is my own faith. So I start to go through like a deconstruction phase of my faith in my mid 20s, where my brain is more fully developed at the time. I'm encountering all these ideas and I'm starting to go like, this thing that I elevated probably shouldn't have been so elevated in my faith. And this is how I'll describe my own deconstruction journey, where it wasn't so much, oh, I want to walk away from the faith so much. Was it, hey, I don't think I have my priorities straight, like growing up, let's say, in purity culture and having this really highly elevated purity culture ethic, and then realizing this kind of feels like an idol, how high it is in my faith hierarchy. Like, I don't think it belongs this high.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it doesn't have some virtue to it, but like, we got to bring this down. It's taking the place of something else that should be there. And so then I go through a couple really difficult things in my 20s. One of them is losing my mom. She passes away to cancer. She was my biggest mentor, my best friend, and the biggest influence on my life. So she passes away untimely. And that was one of like, I go through this crisis. I go through this really difficult time. And that's when it's like, okay, all of the ideals and all of the faith constructs that I have been saying I believe and saying are real, when things get really difficult, do they prove that they are real, or do they kind of like wilt under the pressure? And for me, at least, that was when like my relationship with Jesus was proved to be 100% real and 100% reliable and faithful in the darkest of times. So then you come out on the other side of that, and those values of the Christian faith, the Christian worldview, those aren't just like ideas in a Google Doc or ideas in the Bible, in scripture, but you've had to live through them. And you've had to like put to the test, like the idea of dying to self, and that being what really brings life. Okay, that's what Jesus is saying, take up your cross, and these things are not going to be easy, but I promise to be there. And this is the way to live. And it gets proven true. And you're like, okay, now I trust this more and more. So the same thing with these values, you codify these values, and one of them is, for my own life, is plenty never lasts. And the idea behind that value is that, there's a time for this, there's a time for that. It's rooted in Ecclesiastes. Like, there will be times when you launch a social sermons and, every church fills up every spot in the first week and it's highly successful. It's the biggest launch you've ever done. And it's like all your hard work paid off. And there will be other times when, despite you doing everything right, things go poorly. And it is a reflection on you. Probably not in that individual circumstance, but if you've been living too risky and too reckless, then it is a reflection on you, because you should have known that plenty never lasts. And irrespective of your hard work or your talent or your skill, there's going to come a time when things aren't so great. And that's when you need to be able to buffer that by living with margin and making the good decisions when there's plenty to harvest. Before modern the modern infrastructure that we have today, people came to my country and they were like, dang, it's cold here. And we need to make sure we find a way to keep our preserves through the winter. Otherwise, we ain't going to make it. The first pioneers come here, they're like, this is a tough look for us. And they find a way to do the harvest in the summer, and they preserve their life through the winter by realizing plenty never lasts. We're not always just going to walk outside and it's like, oh, just pick all the fruits and the vegetables and life is good. And it's the same thing, here with that value. And so how they become real and substantive is when they're proven in the challenges of life, or in this case, the challenges of business and the challenges of family. But the reason they're also there is that it doesn't become easier the next time you realize, oh, we have plenty. And oh, no, we need to make sure we live within this specific predefined framework. It doesn't become easier the next time. And that's why these values are there, for evaluating your own decision-making and behavior. But even though it's not as easy, you do remember, you know what? Last time I made this decision, it was the right decision. Last time when I had a crisis of faith, Jesus was faithful. If he was faithful then, he can be faithful now. And if this value kept us afloat and led us on the right trajectory last time, it will do the same now. And that's how you become a consistent leader. It's how you become, more, you're responding to problems. You're not reacting. And so that's probably been what's made them most substantive for us.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow. Gotta land the plane with that one. That was fantastic. This has been great. typically we will do a segment here on the show. It's a little silly, but it's making a mark where we pull out a Sharpie and some paper, and we'll actually have a 60-second drawing prompt. Ashley, you've been on it with the prompts lately. What should we draw today?
Oh gosh, I wasn't even thinking about that.
I know we've just been so wrapped up in story time.
I know. I don't know. I can't think of something visually. Hold on. Let me grab a Sharpie. Give me 1 second. Hold on.
Okay. Everybody's got to get markers. I love it. Guys, down in the chat, if you've got anything that you would like us to draw, go ahead and drop a comment down there. And basically, whoever answers first is going to have it. But I'm feeling like we got to wait for Ashley to come back.
My printer's out of paper. I thought I had paper in there. That's what I get for trusting a printer in 2023.
Did you guys come up with one while I was gone? Because I don't know.
All right. Ashley, do you want to do baseball stuff or do you want to do friends stuff?
Oh, friend. How about baseball friends? How about do both?
Baseball friends. And I say baseball because Brady has been to every Major League Baseball park. A thing on my bucket list. Youth Pastor Fashion 2049. Jeff came with the killer prompt. I actually love that because it ties in with the title today. So we're going to go Youth Pastor Fashion. What is that? 30 years from now plus? Yeah, roughly 30 years from now. What will youth pastors be dressing like? And you could draw an article of clothing. Actually, you got to get on. You got to get on the game today.
I'm sorry.
We got 60 seconds. Ready, set, giddy up, and go.
Oh my gosh, my Sharpie is just so dry.
Real screechy today.
Yes. I'm just having issues with the sound today. I'm sorry. Dang it, this is like so dry. Hold on. It's like literally I don't have any left. I have to get another one. I'm sorry. It literally doesn't have any color. Hold on. I'm sorry.
This is great. This is so good. Brady, I think I've asked you this before, but what was your favorite ballpark?
Oh yeah, that's got to be Fenway in Boston. Just like a different time of like you're walking into like 80 years ago. It feels like it's caught in decades past, and it's so distinct too. That color green, the green monster, which is unlike anything else in all of the ballparks. And when I was there, the Jays were playing, which is my team, Toronto, Canada, and they swept the Red Sox. Boston is the sports city that I hate the most. I have no love lost for that city of sports teams. Hey, that's not about this is hockey, sports hate. That's distinct from real hate. I'm not a hockey fan, but even the Bruins, of course, have a terrible history with I do not care about hockey, our Maple Leafs. So it's tough.
That's great. Yeah, but I was kind of hoping for a different answer because I've been to Fenway and I loved it, man. It's like the cathedral of baseball. Like you just walk in and you feel like whatever feeling the Holy Spirit gives you in church, like the baseball gods have that at Fenway. I don't know if that's super sacrilegious to say that, but it's definitely a must adventure for anybody who's interested in that kind of thing. Ashley, I've given you a lot of extra time because you're complaining so much today. But gotta put that pencil down.
Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
All right, everybody show your work and then we're going to explain it to the class.
Wow. Okay, I did not have a Sharpie, so I used pencil. Ashley. Pardon me for the pencil.
Oh, you just got the pointy.
The pointy boots.
All right, Brady, explain your Dorito.
Yeah.
Actually, looks like what's his name? Johnny Bravo back in Cartoon
Network.
That's
what I was
Johnny
say.
Bravo! Wow,
the bad guy.
Yeah, with the
my wife is the animator in the family. I have zero skills here, and I'm so bad that I can only do the bottom half. But what we have here is my wife and I were talking about heels yesterday, and she's like, I need to wear heels more. And I was like, okay, sure, I support that. So here in 2049, what we have is, we've seen a crossover of fashion here where men are bringing back the heels. And, for all of us short kings out here, me 5'8", 5'9", if I'm lying, like I have some boots, and there's a pretty big chunky heel on those boots. And so I don't actually have imagination, Jeff, for what is on top in 2049. I'm leaving that to the other two hosts on this show. But for me, we're doing wide balloony pants and big heels for at least men. Okay, this is men youth pastor. Okay, I cannot speak for the women youth pastors. If they want to wear heels, great, more power to them. But for the men, we're embracing something that today maybe we're a little bit skeptical about. Thank you.
There you go.
I love it. We'll check back in 20, 30 years and see who is right. Ashley, you want to break yours down for us?
Sure. So as you can see, hold on. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Hell,
he's
cool, the
wearing
future.
like, I wanted it to be like, I thought of like Xenon, like, like the I do you guys remember that Disney movie? So like this like chest plate is like silver, but he's also still wearing like his hip like hat because those also will make a comeback.
Mm-hmm.
And he's super ripped
Sure.
with like reptile hands for some reason. And then his pants are like kind of baggy, so it's going to be like another resurgence of like what we have now, like the
Is that a little
2000-ish.
Are we getting a little midriff action there?
No, that's supposed to be a belt, but yeah, we can say that.
Oh, gotcha.
I'll put a belly button there.
I like that. Bring the heels and the crop tops for the men.
Yeah, and then he's got his like big old Air Max shoes, but they're like the newer
Because Air Maxes
ones.
haven't gone anywhere in 30 years.
Yeah, they're
I love
like
that.
the updated ones, and
My favorite sneaker. I love to hear it.
yeah, and see, he's hip, cool, and the future.
And the future. Wow. Without those labels, I would not have known, but thankfully. All right. I feel like mine is probably more like 2030. And this is following in line with the whole like everything is puffy, everything feels like it's from the metaverse line of thinking. So this is one single, like my granddad used to wear Dickies, right? A ton.
Yeah.
And this is kind of that same model, like all your clothes are one piece, but it's more like a big sleeping bag that inflates a little bit. And he's got the hoodie string drawn tight, so there's a little scrunch around the face. And he's holding his little like liquid capsule that he holds his drink in. But everything else is just like puffy ridges, one piece of material. You just crawl in that face hole and then squirm around until everything fits right.
It almost looks like a minion with like a butt crack. If you bring it back, like his leg like looks almost like a little butt, like it's like a minion. Yeah.
I fear in between services when you have to use the bathroom, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Everybody just crawls out of their suit. But guys, this has been a wild, fascinating, delightful episode. As always, that's going to be a wrap for today. Huge shout out to Brady for joining us and having fun and cutting up and sharing some pretty deep life goal things that I feel like a lot of us have some room to kind of self-evaluate as well after the show. But we're going to have links for all the stuff down in the notes below. Love y'all. Adios. Until next week. Peace.